What's going on, nation? Scott Herman, welcome back to the channel. In today's video, I'm going to be going over some deadlift tips with you guys to help you instantly increase your deadlift. Now, if you want a more in-depth video on deadlifting, I made one a few years back right here. Still holds true today. Lots of great information. A bit longer, a bit more to absorb, but definitely worth taking a look. And I also have it in article format. It's called Deadlift, Why You're Not Lifting as Much as You Could. So check that out if you haven't already. I'll post a link down in my comment section below. But as far as today, my main concern is to get you guys instantly lifting more weight with better form by giving you 4 useful tips. So let's get started. All right, guys, so tip number 1, don't be afraid to adjust your foot position. And obviously, we're going to be dealing with the conventional deadlift, so your foot position's already going to be quite close in order to perform the movement correctly. In order to do a conventional deadlift, your feet have to be close together, and you're going to grab on the outside of your knees. However, when I first started deadlifting, my foot position was wide like this, because at the time I was inexperienced, and this is what felt most comfortable to me. However, as I started lifting heavier and heavier weights, I noticed that my feet got closer and closer together, and I was able to generate more force that way. So it's going to take a little bit of time, but you're going to have to mess with your foot position as you're training, getting better with the exercise to find where you're going to be your strongest. Chances are where you originally start the exercise, when you first start deadlifting, isn't going to be your strongest point. It's just where you felt the most comfortable at that time. So mess with your foot position and make sure you feel comfortable. Tip number 2 is make sure you bring your shins to the barbell. I see a lot of guys in the gym set up their deadlift and they stand about here. And what happens when you stand here is that when you bend over to grab the barbell, you're already going into spinal flexion and you're rolling your shoulders forward. And if you're rolling your shoulders forward and going into spinal flexion, it's going to be harder to correct that when you go to initiate the lift, especially if you're just trying to grip it and rip it. So what you need to do is get used to dropping down straight like this with your shoulders in a neutral position versus being rolled, and that's going to help you keep your chest up and allow you to not fall into spinal flexion when you do the exercise. So get real close to that barbell, pretty much on your shins, maybe a little forward like this, slightly bend your knees, and get used to dropping straight down, grabbing, and then pulling up. Tip number 3 has to do with finding the right hip height when initiating the exercise. And this can mean the difference between lifting with your back and using a hip drive to pull the weight off the ground. It should feel as if you're pushing the earth down, and that is how the weight is coming up, all right? Whenever you do a deadlift, if you feel like you're pulling it off the ground, chances are you're using a lot of your back in the movement. Now, when you're deadlifting and you get into your position, everything is set up correctly, if you're too low, what's going to happen is your hips are going to come up first, and then you're going to pull like this to come to the top of the movement. And what happens when you break the exercise down into 2 parts versus 1, you leave a ton of power on the table. What you need to do is adjust your hips and find that sweet spot so that when you initiate the lift, it's one fluid movement right from the get-go. So again, if you're too low and your hips shoot up first, even if it's a little bit, you're already losing a lot of that tension that you could be placing in the bar to pull as much weight as possible by using hip drive and pushing through your hips. The 4th and final tip to help you instantly increase your deadlift has to do with bracing and not just your core. Too many guys set up for their deadlift and they take in way too much air, and when they go down and get into the starting position, they feel so compressed that it affects their lift. So as you continue to get better with the exercise, you need to figure out just how much air you can bring in and still feel comfortable doing the movement and bracing your core enough so that you don't fall into spinal flexion. Personally, I like to breathe in through my nose and then come down and get into the starting position. I'm bracing my core, and bracing your core isn't sticking your stomach out like this, okay? That's sticking out your stomach. Bracing your core is taking in air and then flexing your core around all that air in your system, and it's going to create basically a solid wall. And that solid wall is going to prevent you from crumbling forward like this, all right? Now, once you get that down and you're able to brace your core correctly, there's a few other things you have to keep in mind. One of those things is going to be flexing your lats and keeping your arms straight. By keeping your arms straight and locked and flexing your lats and also bracing your core, that's making your upper body one solid piece. And at that point, your hands basically become hooks just to hold the weight, and you can focus all of your energy on hip drive by applying the first 3 tips that I had already given you. And as you start to lift heavier and heavier, you might find yourself in a position where you want to use a weight belt and maybe some lifting straps. Now, personally, I like to use a lever belt, and I don't like to use lifting straps when I deadlift. I prefer using chalk and doing a switch grip. But for those of you who would like to use lifting straps, these are really good ones. And what's great about these is they wrap right around the barbell, so it's very minimal setup. If you use traditional straps, what ends up happening is you spend a lot of time just trying to wrap your hands and get that position down, and you waste a lot of time and energy doing it. With these, you can come under the bar like this, wrap them underneath, grip it, and then rip it. So they work out well. And as for the belt, I like to use a lever belt because it's a lot easier for me to get that belt into the right position in order to execute the lift. And I don't have to basically kill myself with a traditional prong belt to get into position. So my belt's already set up for me. I lock it in. Before I start to lift, I close the lever. It's set to the right tightness. As soon as I finish the lift, I undo my belt, and then I can breathe again. And it should feel tight. Not so tight that you can't take in enough air to brace your core, but tight enough so that as you're lifting that heavy weight, you feel protected. And you're not wrapping the belt around your lower waist, okay? It's going around the middle of your core. And if you guys would like to get a lever belt or some lifting straps, post a link down in the info section below to Iron Bull Strength. I get 10% off their entire site, code MS10, so make sure you check it out. If you want to see that video I mentioned earlier, you can check it out right here. There's also a link to the article in the info section below. And for those of you looking for a new program to start off the new year with, you have to train from home, check out my 12-week at-home training program right here, 7 days free. Just click the link. Be sure to tap that like and subscribe button. And as always, more good stuff coming soon. See you guys.